Hello and welcome. You're with us here on The Date. Today we're meeting a young and incredibly ambitious woman who's dynamic and constantly on the move. We're talking about Ameera Shah of Metropolis. She's taken a one-lab family business and turned it into a formidable player in the healthcare diagnostic space over the last 10 years. And she's already got her next trick up her sleeve. In just over a decade, Ameera has taken Metropolis from 1 to 100 labs and 800 collection centers in 5 countries. She works on a model of partnerships, and today with 25 successful JVs under her belt, she can confidently say it's succeeding. Ameera believes that this is the way to go going forward as well, in order to build a sustainable growth path. It's this confidence and vision that's inspired investors like Warburg Pincus to put in almost 400 crores behind Metropolis, which is today valued at close to 1,500 crores. So first up, I wanted to find out from you really where that drive to be an entrepreneur comes from, because I know you've always had that in you, that thrill that you wanted to go out there and do something, you know, create a business, create an idea. How did that come to you?
To be very honest with you, even when I was very young, I guess somewhere it's biological, where I had it in my blood. I'm half Gujarati and half Sindhi. So you can say there was a little banya in my blood from very early on, where when I was a kid, I was probably only 10 years old, and I used to sort of go to the kitchen and find all the vegetables in the house that my grandmother had bought, and I would put them back in the sort of tokri, and I would go back and I would pretend like I'm a vegetable vendor and sell them back to her for twice the price. So I started my profit making in very early days.
How long before she figured it out?
It took her a few days and a few weeks, but she was kind enough to continue sort of going. So, you know, just very early on, I was very clear about, you know, few things through different experiences that I had. You know, my parents sent me to these camps called CISV, which were Children's International Summer Village, which were places you sort of go and students and kids from across the world come together and you spend a month together. And I always sort of had a little bit more of a global perspective from a very early age, because I'd interacted with kids of 80 different countries, spoken different languages, spent a lot of time in understanding their cultures, and I liked that variety. And the second thing I knew was just that I always wanted to have a big impact on whatever I did. I was very uncomfortable. I did an internship with Goldman Sachs in New York, and I remember, you know, it was such a big thing. Oh, you know, she got an internship with Goldman Sachs, and to me, I just felt like that's great, but you know, the work has to appeal to me. And honestly, I think investment banking was not my cup of tea at all. I was not motivated. I didn't feel like I was adding any value. And then I worked with a very small firm of 5 of us. This was during the dot-com boom.
Right.
And just had the most exceptional time. It was a total failure. The company totally collapsed. But the idea of talking marketing and strategy and financials at the age of 20, to me was an eye-opener. I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to be driving the fate and the journey of an organization into, you know, a direction that I believe in. So yeah, it's been through different things. It's always been sort of there. I came back to India in 2001 and found that you know, my father, who's a pathologist, had created his lab over 20 years and had created a really good brand name for himself in South Bombay. And there was a lot of respect for him and the kind of work he did. And he always had this idea of creating an indigenous chain of labs across India with what he had already created. Since I had the business background and he had the technical skill sets, we thought, you know, this would make a lot of sense if I came back and we sort of started growing this together. So yeah, I came back to India in 2001 from the US, and we just started really building out the firm together.
Right, okay, so absolutely. Now, what has also really made Metropolis stand out is the fact that you kind of arrived at a somewhat unique business model. You didn't sort of go about it as, okay, one lab at a time. There was a larger strategy behind it. So just run us through that, and also what gave you the confidence that this is going to work.
I'll be lying to you if I tell you there was a big strategy in place or there was a confidence that everything was going to work. I think with most entrepreneurs, you sort of do what you think is right at the time, and you hope that it's all going to link together somewhere and make sense and result in some success.
Yeah.
And all of us can look back and say, oh, we had planned it from day one, but the truth is it never happens like that. So 2001, when I came back, we were one lab. We were, like I said, well-known South Bombay. We had maybe a couple of crores in profit.
Right.
And we don't come from a business family that I had sort of a funding available to grow it out. So the challenge was really with minimal amount of money, with a fragmented market, with no path to follow. We were the sort of trailblazers in actually figuring out a model to grow. Because healthcare is a very local business. It's a very relationship-based business. Forget about every city, every suburb of Bombay has its own entrenched relationships, which go 30 years, 40 years. To sort of overwhelm those and go and set up your own sort of venture in the middle of those relationships is extremely challenging. So we reached sort of a conclusion that since Metropolis as a company was not known anywhere else, since we didn't have the money, we said, let's find a way to get other pathologists like my father, who had built a good brand in other cities, and who probably are also saying that, okay, I've got one lab and now what, right? How do I really take this to the next step forward? And before the multinationals come in, let's get all these group of pathologists under one common roof called Metropolis, and create an indigenous chain of labs. So we actually approached a leading pathologist in Chennai and talked to him about saying that, look, why don't you partner with us? We do an entire range of referral tests, which means we had a range of about 2,000 varieties of tests at the time. This gentleman had more of a routine lab, and he did maybe 300 or 400 varieties of tests. So we said, look, there's a lot of synergy. We'll come together. Whatever test you don't do, you can send it to us in Bombay, and we'll help you really expand your brand across Chennai. So that's how we really started in 2003.
And was there any resistance to
Oh,
it?
huge.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Huge. I mean, the common questions were like, what do you mean? What are you going to add to my practice that I already do? What money are you going to pay for it? Because we were actually buying into the firm. So how do you value it? These were things which were completely unknown. I had some basic theoretical knowledge, and so we really, had to figure out as to what was the best way to go about valuing it. Where do we pay from? How do we then actually get return on investment? How do we grow it? How do we get better profits? So everything was a very gradual stage. And when you're partnering with another pathologist who's been working individually for 30 years and they're used to being their own boss, suddenly for them to accept a partner in their practice and to have to discuss things becomes a new challenge. So you have to do it gradually, you have to do it carefully, and recognize that like a marriage, it takes a while for two people to come together, accept each other, love each other for their good and bad. And it's the same process you go through in a partnership.
It's a process.
Yeah, it is a process.
Now, of course, you're all over the country, and not only in India, but you're also spread out internationally. The question here is, how have you managed to scale up so quickly, so rapidly, despite the pitfalls, despite the fact that you were really young, and it's learning ground for you as well. You didn't manage to fall into that rut of scaling up too quickly, too fast.
Yeah. I think the business school education to some extent held good from the point of view of learning from cases and other people's situations, where I did read stories about our companies where people were in a hurry to prove to themselves and prove to the world that they can make it, that they're somewhere and they're someone. And I was very, very careful not to fall into that rut of saying, I need to prove to the world we're number one in revenue and we're the biggest and we're the this and we're the that. Because finally, I see this as a long-term thing for me. I'm going to be doing this for the next many years.
Right.
And if it's a marathon and it's not a sprint, then, I really genuinely believe not slow and steady, but steady and sustainable wins the race. There's no point in growing 100% every year for the first 5 years if the way you grow and the quality of your growth is poor and the foundations are weak, where you then have to spend the next 5 years in pulling yourself out of that mess. And we've seen that happen, Rob's data, with a lot of organizations across the world. So we've been just careful to, not that we haven't made mistakes, we've made lots of mistakes along the way. But you try to, as far as what you're aware of and what you're conscious of, you try to do what you think is right at the time. We made a couple of decisions actually early on. So since 2001, 2002, even as promoters, we've actually not drawn money out of the firm. We've actually reinvested all accruals back into the company, which has actually allowed the spurt of growth to go on. And that's a very conscious choice, because as entrepreneurs, as your business does well, you also want it to reflect in your personal life. You want to reflect with the things that you can buy and with the lifestyle you lead. And we sort of made a very conscious choice to say that our focus is Metropolis, and we're going to sleep, eat and breathe it, and take all the money and sort of put it back in there.
Let's take a very quick break. When we come back, we continue to talk to Ameera about some of the challenges or learnings she had in her early years, and also how she's evolved a management style for herself and for the company. We'll come back with that. Do stay tuned.
Of course, once you start getting written about, you start getting, as an organization, you start getting talked about as a leader, you know that you've reached a place where in your industry, to a large extent, you've now been counted as successful. And people are now trying to copy your model. I think that's when you sort of get a sense, okay, I've crossed that line. And now I know if I just keep doing what I'm doing, and I keep my head down and work really hard and keep the organization on the right track, hopefully you don't get derailed along the way.